Powerful men have been pushed out of jobs in the media, the arts, politics, academia, and the restaurant business because women spoke up to allege egregious behavior. It's different, though, on Wall Street. Why has the Me Too movement hit a roadblock when it comes to the big banks? In today's Walk the Talk, Bloomberg's ongoing conversation about diversity in the workforce, we put that question to Bloomberg's Max Abelson. He wrote the story for this week's issue of Bloomberg Business Week, and he joins us now. So you went around, you tried to find instances of sexual harassment, and there haven't been a whole lot.
That's right. I mean, people who've followed Wall Street over a pretty long period of time get to know things like, remember the Boom Boom Room lawsuit? Where that was an office in what was then Smith Barney, where they, in their office, in their basement outside New York City, they had a room they called the Boom Boom Room. But, you know, some men on Wall Street, and to be fair, some women, said to me, look, you know, those are the old days, things have been cleaned up. But in my interviews with more than 20 women, they talked to me about how that isn't the case, and that they experienced or observed sexual harassment on Wall Street, and I mean, you know, the big banks. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that leads to the question about why we're not seeing the Harvey Weinstein phenomenon, you know, the movement of powerful men being pushed out of their positions because women feel courageous enough to speak up. You know, why we're not seeing that on Wall Street. And what the piece is about is financial and legal and cultural forces that are keeping harassment quiet on Wall Street.
Let's talk about some of those forces. So you said, well, financial. Is it just that there's so much money potentially involved for the people who stick it out that people theoretically feel it's just not worth the risk of, like, what is the financial angle? You
know, it's not just how much money women are paid, it's also the way they're paid. You know, it's not, you know, the reality is if you're working a job and you make, you know, $40,000 a year and you're harassed in that workplace, I think you're also pressured to stay silent by your financial necessity for that $40,000. Right. And it's true that when women make $1 million a year in these roles, you know, that there's more money at stake for them, but not necessarily proportionally more than someone who's relying on $40,000. But there's something about the way that money is delivered. A lot of it comes on Wall Street from discretionary bonuses. So women I spoke to talked about being afraid that if they spoke up, they would alienate the men who have discretionary power to give them huge sums of money in one fell swoop. You know, some of that money comes from annual salary that bosses decide on, but some of it comes, you know, at the end of the year from a man's decision about what to give that woman.
Yeah, the big chunk there. And until you change those men and replace them with women, that's always going to be how it's going to be. Talk about the legal angle as well, because there are a lot of non-disclosure agreements signed. There's a lot of arbitration that's done to resolve disputes that plays right into the silence.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to my editor on this story, Ann Reifenberg. You know, she and I had to talk for a long period of time about what it is that's specific to Wall Street. Because to be fair, there are a lot of other industries where women still don't feel comfortable speaking up. But what we talked about is the arbitration system. That we have data that shows Wall Street banks rely on the arbitration system more than some other firms. So what you see is companies like Citigroup using the arbitration system more than other firms, which means that it's really hard to know what goes on inside of an arbitration hearing. It's public court hearings are public, and the press often finds out about them, but not so in arbitration.
Talk a little bit about the one person that has been fired, which is Harold Ford. He's a former congressman. Morgan Stanley fired him, and this was even after they were not able to prove some of the allegations.
Well, look, I mean, you know, we included the Ford anecdote because it's unfair to say that nothing has changed. You know, it would be wrong and misleading to say that, you know, the Harvey Weinstein phenomenon has absolutely not touched Wall Street at all. You know, it does feel like, according to our reporting, that there's something about Wall Street, these forces that leave these companies kind of almost as if they're immune. But there have been some changes, and Harold Ford was one of them. So first of all, Ford is a former congressman from Tennessee, former Democrat, and he got a job at Morgan Stanley a few years ago and was pushed out of it recently, only within the last couple of months, I think. He denies wrongdoing, but Morgan Stanley says they investigated claims from a person not inside Morgan Stanley. It was from a person outside of Morgan Stanley. So even there, it's a little bit different. We're still not seeing women inside of Wall Street banks being comfortable enough to speak up publicly and name powerful bankers and then have them lose their jobs. But you know what? We're still only a couple of months. It was only in October that Weinstein was pushed out. So maybe we'll see changes in 2018.